Welcome back to the Fire Break. I'm Steve Wolf. As you know, the Fire Break is sponsored by Team Wildfire, developing new techniques and technology to reduce the fatalities from wildfires and property losses. Important stuff. I've got an amazing guest here today. You're going to recognize his work, even if you don't recognize him. I have John Gould with us today, and John is the president and CEO of 10 Tanker. So you've all seen the pictures, bright red stuff dropping out of beautiful airplanes, saving the world from wildfires, or at least, doing whatever it is that aerial drops can do. John, welcome to the Fire Break. How are you today?
Thanks, Steve. Glad to be here. Doing well.
Awesome. So tell me about 10 Tanker. What do you guys do, and how did you start? How did you get into it?
Yeah, so 10 tankers got four very large air tankers. I think we're the only very large air tanker operator in the world today. We fly four DC-10s, primarily on Forest Service contracts. But with the Forest Service contracts, we're all over North America with those. So we drop 9,400 gallons per
Wow.
drop,
How
which
much is that, like, in terms of like swimming pools or something?
well, it's a swimming pool's worth of retardant every time you drop. I mean, 10,000 gallons is a lot of retardant, and you can put a lot of great fire line in with that much retardant. And I think that's what makes it so popular with firefighters out there is that they get over 3 times as much retardant for every drop than they do from a standard size large air tanker, and you can get a lot of work done. In that respect, it's a great airplane for us to use. And as it turns out, it's a great airplane for the job. Just as we when we first came into it, we had a lot of pushback from, I think, the users saying, well, they can't fly in the mountains, or, they can't fly in the rough weather. It's, just a flat land sort of airplane. And I think that they found over the last 10 years, 15 years, that it's actually the opposite is true. We have a great airplane that does really well in any terrain, and drops a great line wherever we are. We can drop downhill better than anybody. We got big flaps, big slats on the airplane that keeps us going slow. So we make effective drops in, I think, really challenging terrain. And we fly out at 175,000 pounds below our max gross takeoff weight. So we're really light when we get out there. Really light for the capabilities of the airplane. So that makes us much more maneuverable, much more capable of getting where we need to drop the retardant and get over the fire. So it turns out that DC-10 is a great airplane for the job that it's doing.
Yeah, I believe, George C. Scott spoke to this point in Dr. Strangelove when he said, if you get the right pilot, you can just get right in there. Right. Yeah. So tell me about your pilots.
Well, I think we've got some of the best pilots, most experienced pilots in the industry, right? So our airplane takes, it's a crew of three. So pilot, co-pilot, flight engineer. And we traditionally got all of our pilots out of the large air transport world. But lately we've been trying to pull some of our pilots from the fire world. We've got ex-lead plane pilots, ex-smoke jumper pilots, air attack pilots, and we found just as much success training our captains to be large airplane pilots as we have finding large airplane pilots to be good firefighters. So we've got a combination of both. I think that we don't lose a lot of our pilots to other companies. I think they like flying the DC-10. They like the amount of work that it can do, and I think that the good positive feedback they get from the guys on the ground. So that's our pilots.
That's amazing. So tell me about the ideal use case scenario? Because obviously aerial attack isn't, the preferred method for every fire. In what fires does aerial attack really excel? Like, where does it really shine?
Well, I mean, it all depends on the guys on the ground, right? I mean, that's where the work starts. How much help do they need? And we've seen, uh, in the last 10, 15 years that we've been doing this, that it started out that our airplane, they thought that the best use of it was going to be on large fires where, you know, lost cause fires, right? Well, let's get the biggest thing we can and we'll start dropping with that. Um, that that seems to be kind of, I mean, it still happens, right? I mean, you can't have a fire that's about to burn up community and not do as much as you can to save as many houses as you can. And I think that we're effective there, right? When there's a lot of fire, we drop a wide line with a lot of retardant, very concentrated in the middle. Our tanks do a good job of dropping that retardant. So we oftentimes find ourselves flying out at 4 o'clock in the afternoon after single engine air tankers or large air tankers have been working on a fire all day long, and they can't get around it, and they'll finally call us. Um, and that's a very common use of it. When nothing else works, they'll get us. Although we've seen that's bad fire strategy. I'll say that as a former incident commander. Those are people who aren't really looking ahead at what's coming in the day. I would say that there are a couple regions in the U.S. that use this for initial attack, and I think it's a very effective initial attack strategy because when you bring an overwhelming force to the fire, you get a line around it and box that fire in, and you don't have to worry about it. And that 1 acre fire or that 5 acre fire doesn't become a 500,000 acre fire. You get it right away. So we're seeing more of that, not as much as you'd expect, but so the ideal use for our airplane is, I think, anywhere that firefighters need support from the air. Anywhere where the fire is hot, they need to get around it, put some line in to help them get around that fire. That's where we're most effective.
And how wide and how long a swath do you lay down at a time?
Yeah, Steve, you know that when we go to a fire, um, they'll ask for a coverage, or we'll look at the fire and they'll say, okay, if it's a grass fire, it's a coverage level 2. 2 gallons per 100 square feet is what the calibration will come out of the bottom of our airplane, all the way up to 8 gallons per 100 square feet. So if we're dropping at a coverage level 2 on a grass fire in Nevada, we'll have over a mile of line, excuse me, that will come out of the bottom of the airplane. Well over a mile of line, and that's a lot of line.
Yeah, that is.
You don't necessarily put it all down in one drop. Not many lines are a mile long just straight, but occasionally it happens. But we can come back and reinforce line or tag into it and turn the corner with it, whatever. But if we're coverage level 8, our line's going to be 8 gallons per 100 square feet, quarter of a mile long, but it's still a good positive line, 150 feet wide, and concentrated in the middle, and then it tapers out to the sides. So that's how those are kind of the parameters around how we do the drops and what they look like.
And in terms of frequency, what's the turnaround time to get back to a conveniently located airport and reload?
I mean, like most airplanes out there, our average mission is an hour, just over an hour in length, which is 15 minutes out to the fire, 20 minutes out to the fire, 10 minutes over, 20, 25 minutes back. So we can do that from anywhere in the country where we can load up. Our load time is real quick. I think that the VLAT bases that we go into, used to us now, they'll get us loaded in 15, 20 minutes tops. So we don't need gas. It's 20 minutes and we're back up. We have to pull fuel, then it's probably 30 minutes. But we can do both simultaneously. But it just takes a little longer to fuel and put the retardant on. So it's a quick turnaround, not much different than the rest of our colleagues in the large air tanker business.
And at how many locations do you maintain retardant? So somebody calls you in upstate New York today and says, we need you up here. Could they get you? Do you do on call on demand, or are you mostly
Well,
tied in with contracts?
there has to be infrastructure for large air tankers, and for a very large air tanker, more so than our smaller colleagues. So I think that historically the Forest Service and the states have developed air tanker bases that are around the country. There's about 15 or 16 of them that we commonly use now. If someone in upstate New York said they wanted us, obviously there'd be an airport close by that we could land at, but would they have retardant there? And the answer is probably not. When we go to the East Coast, it's Chattanooga or Lake City, Florida, that we can utilize the air tanker bases that can take us. But most of the bases are concentrated in the Western U.S., and they go from north to south, from Washington State down to southern Arizona, and all points in between.
So the logistics of getting the retardant there in advance are obviously important. In the event that you can't do that, do you do water drops?
Well, of course, all of our contracts when we fly in North America are Forest Service contracts. Sometimes we've worked for the state of California many, many times. We're not responsible for the retardant. We don't buy the retardant. We don't load it in
Okay.
our airplanes. It's the end user. So contracts with the Forest Service, it's them who will do it. So whenever we pull into an air tanker base, there's retardant there. There are people there to load it into our airplane, push it. Now, when we fly in Chile, for instance, or Mexico, we'll drop water because oftentimes that is the most economical solution for them. I think as a fireman, you probably know that it's not the best solution. You lose a lot of effectiveness without the water dehydrates so quickly. You lose 20% of it between the airplane and the ground, and on a hot day, it goes away really fast, and retardant doesn't. So they lose a lot of effectiveness with water, but they're the customer. We'll drop what they ask us to.
Right. Like the post office. We don't care what's in the envelope, right? Have you dropped seawater versus freshwater, and is one more effective than the other?
We don't drop seawater. I
Okay.
mean, I think that most people, float planes would rather not be in seawater. It's very corrosive, and
Yeah.
so yeah, we drop what the Forest Service asks us to drop,
Whatever
or
they
what
need.
Cal Fire asks us to drop.
I see. Okay. And what are the places that are most active now? Is it all domestic, or have you seen more growth internationally?
I think a lot of growth internationally. I mean, we probably 10, 12 years ago was the first time we went to Australia, and you know, we go down there every couple of years. Whenever they have a big fire season, we see them demmed up down there. Um, South America, we have uh, a lot of interest from South America, and I think that what we're seeing is around the world, places that didn't used to be fire prone all of a sudden are finding themselves with big wildland fire problems. And, it's happening in Europe, it's happening in South America, it's happening in Australia, it's happening in Asia. Yeah, I think that we're finding more work in the off season in the southern hemisphere than we ever thought we would.
Yeah. Is there even still an off season?
It depends on the year. For this year, yeah, there was an off season for us for sure. But yeah, some years it just it never stops, right? You leave North America and you head south of the equator and you're working again. So
It's always summer somewhere. Huh?
yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Wow. What changes do you see in the industry out, with the compadres, with your allied services that aren't up in the flat with you? Are they changing strategies? Have you seen any adaptation to the increase in fire? Is it stressing the resources?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's stressing. Let's just stay in North America. I think that we're having trouble finding enough firefighters to go on the ground. I mean, I know when I was a firefighter, um, we used to have people on the ground wherever we dropped retardant. And when I called retardant in as a Pulaski dragger, you had to be on the ground and ready to use it. And now we think that there's probably 75% of the drops we make are on unmanned line. So I think that, to me, that says, yeah, our colleagues on the ground are having a hard time finding the staffing they need and the people they need to take care of the fire problem as it exists today. Much bigger problem than it was, 30 years ago. Um, but they're adapting. I think that the the resources that are available outside the ground firefighters are, they're growing, right? There's a better, I think that ISR equipment that's in airplanes and helicopters or on drones that are above the fires are giving incident commanders and management back in the office a better idea of what's going on, and maybe better allocation of resources through that. Um, but at the end of the day, firefighting's pretty rudimentary sport, right? You got to get your feet on the ground and your face in the dirt, and you got to put that fire out with the firefighters on the ground. We can do what we can from the air to help them out, but it's those guys on the ground that are putting it out. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of changes going on in terms of the advances that are being made in the delivery systems we have for retardant. There's a lot of great air tankers out there, and every day there's more showing up. But so there's advances there. I think there's advances in the ISR equipment that's out there that gives our firefighters a better idea of how the fire's burning, and they can attack it better. So there's my observation anyway.
Okay. So when now I'm speaking to you as a former incident commander, when data comes in about a fire, uh, where it is, what it's doing, how it's growing, etc., what it's threatening, how obvious is it what you're supposed to do, what your response should look like? Is it pretty cut and dry, like this is what's happening, this is what should happen? Or do you think there's a role for AI in assisting in that decision making process, especially as the fires get more enormous?
Yeah, I mean, I think that depends on what the resources are that are being dispatched. Most often, if you're if you're on a forest, they get a report of the smoke, they send an engine out there, and then that IC from the engine, that Type 5 IC that hits it first will respond back and say, I need this kind of help or not. I think that I think that our industry struggles with response to fires, right? There's a lot of fires that go, uh, for an hour, 2, 3, 4, maybe a day after they've been detected with no response, because they're managed responses. These are fire management agencies. Um, but I think that with the advent of some of the uh, detection systems that are up there, yeah, I think that better response is coming. It always isn't here yet, but I know that the Department of Interior's got a couple PC-12s that are out there now that can look 50 miles either direction and send a live feedback to the office that says, I want to, here's how it's burning. Here are the conditions out there, which would create an entirely different response from the dispatch office if they knew exactly what was going on before they even launched any resources. So those kinds of things are out there, but right now I think that the responses are like they have. Sometimes they're pre-planned responses, depends on where you are in the U.S., and sometimes it's, well, let's send an airplane out there and see what it is. So.
So there was a time when the DC-10 was, state of the art commercial airline travel,
Right.
and
Doesn't seem
it's
that long ago, does it?
no, but I think it was, and I'm wondering, as you get into larger VLATs or very large aerial tankers, are we going to see, bigger planes? Are we going to see more use of military aircraft? Would you have a use for C-130s or larger out there?
Well, I mean, Colson does a great job with their C-130s. I mean, they're a 4,000-gallon tanker. Um, yeah, Steve, it's hard for me to look ahead and see exactly how it's gonna pan out. I mean, it's a bigger problem. Wildfire is a big problem. Response to it is, you know, I think it's growing, but I think that what the Forest Service did 20 years ago with these next generation air tankers, they evolved from the World War II air tankers to the fleet that they've got today. Um, Sweeping jets like the MD-87, the DC-10, the BA-146s. These are all very capable, very good airplanes. 737s are out there, C-130s. So there's a wide variety of very capable, very safe airplanes that no one worries about whether the wings are going to fall off of an airplane that's out there now. They've changed that. So I don't personally see that there's going to be a giant change in the next 10 years. But I think as this problem, look what's happening in Texas right now. It's huge fires that are changing the lives of, thousands of people across Texas. Their whole ranches are burning. Their entire, their livestock's been wiped out. So, I think that as people become more focused or more aware of the dangers that wildfires pose, and that we need to be able to do something about them, I think that more money will come into the space. There may be purpose-built aircraft that come after that. Right now, the scoopers that are out, only purpose-built aircraft that are out there fighting fires, the CL-415s. So maybe purpose-built aircraft will come back into the fore, but that's a lot of money and a lot of development time, and it isn't going to happen in the next couple of years. So that's a long way of answering to say that, yeah, I think that this capable fleet we've got now will probably stay static for the next 5-6 years.
So that's not because the demand is static. It's just because the funding is static. Is that right? If they put more money into R&D, or if it was easier for innovators, CEOs, people who have the experience, who could see technologically what's needed, but lack the funds to create that technology, because the agencies are, slow to adapt or to fund
Yeah,
new solutions. Yeah.
it's kind of a chicken or egg question, right? I mean, all these agencies struggle with funding.
Yeah.
Do we really have enough assets out there for the problem as it exists? And we're never fast enough to spool up, because we still, just like we did back in the 1960s, yeah, September comes, all the assets go away, and we don't think about it again until the next summer shows up. The world has changed, but I think that dynamic is slower to change than the climate has. So, and a lot of it has to do with money. I think funding coming out of Congress is still, the Forest Service, the DOI, they can't depend on this funding to do. They can't innovate with it, right? The funding that they have this year is the same as that they had last year. And the suppression funds, the emergency suppression funds that are out there, are the only things that they can tap into to make a difference. So yeah, that the funding is a big problem. I don't. I think that if there were better funding there, more consistent long-term contracts, I think you'd find more innovation, in the private sector. But right now, that money's just not there.
Have you?
It hasn't kept up with the problem. I'll say that.
Well, it would need to. Have you ever been in a situation where there were significant values at risk, but you hit a budget ceiling, or is that not a thing?
Uh, it's not a thing. I mean,
Because
if there's an emergency out there, I mean, and that's what this emergency fire suppression fund is all about, right? Um, when there's fires burning and people suffering, no one thinks about, well, how am I going to trim the budget in this case? That doesn't happen. Um, I think that where it impacts, the taxpayers is that we don't we don't put airplane we don't engage our fleet before. This is Texas is a great example of how it happened. Where were all the airplanes? They should, if you have an emergency response organization, you need to be ready. There's not a fire station in the world that isn't ready 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But we just let, over 1 million acres burn in Texas because we weren't ready to engage in those fires. And I think that, um, that's kind of a symptom of how we fail to engage, that really hurts the taxpayer, and that has to change. I mean, if we have a response organization, if it's the DOI, or if it's the Forest Service, or whether it becomes the Department of Homeland Security, they have to be prepared to respond all the time. But I think, once we're geared up, we've got a pretty great system in place that, gets assets where they need to be, and, gets gets fires put out, when they can be put out. So
yeah, when in the Panhandle fire, it was not only civilian and agricultural crisis, but it also there was some military issue there when they had to shut down the Pantex nuclear missile facility there.
yeah,
Um, and I might anticipate that as these fires encroach more on military assets, the military might put more money into R&D. This is something I'm hoping for.
yeah,
Is that the big technology jumps in civilian firefighting would come from R&D to develop military firefighting solutions. Same fire, but a more advanced level of technology that could
yeah.
be funded through SIBRs or R&D that would originate in the military.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
I think they've already done that for us, right? I mean, all the ISR stuff and all the drone technology. I mean, that's come straight out of the military in just the last decade. And I think we're still trying to figure out how to use it in the wildland fire world. But yeah,
yeah,
that's I think
we'll
you're
see.
right. That's going to happen.
So you said you've got 4 DC-10s right now. Uh, the UN forecast is that we're going to see a 30% increase in wildfires globally by 2050, and that I think that's probably conservative. Uh, that it's probably going to grow faster. So, would you anticipate, growing your fleet? Or I'm guessing you have to have a certain usage in order to make it effective or efficient to bring new aircraft on. Do you think? You're heading towards that?
Um, it doesn't seem like it. There's a yeah. I mean, I think that right now in North America, for most of the large air tankers, there's a couple states that will contract large air tankers. California is developing their own fleet, so they're don't worry about it. But yeah, the funding comes out of the Forest Service, and they have, their pot of money to contract tankers has been limited, just like the pot of money they have to contract helicopters or caterers or whatever it is that they need for the fire world is limited. So um, you know we would develop more airplanes. We would innovate if we had the contract stability, and I think that's a phrase you'll hear from any large air tanker operators that we
Current or former? Right.
yeah, we need it. We need contract stability for us to go out and develop more aircraft, different aircraft, better aircraft. Um, I don't I don't see a huge influx of money coming into the wildland fire world anytime soon, regardless of what a report from the United Nations says. And we
Well,
see.
they didn't say more money would be coming. They just said more fire would be coming.
I believe more fires coming. I mean, I see
Yeah.
that, but we get calls every off season from Southern Hemisphere and Indonesia or you know Argentina, all through South America. Countries that don't have the money to put and support an exclusive use wildland firefighting force there, and they want us to come spur of the moment. There's a fire burning in the Amazon. Can you be here tomorrow? And it's impossible for us to do. And I don't know. I don't see a way that stability is going to come to uh, those less developed countries. I think you need stability in the economy, like Canada has, like the U.S. has, like Australia has. Chile starting to have some stability in there, and you see they have, over the last 5-6 years, started to develop a force that's in place all the time. But around the rest of the world, it will take a while to get there, I think.
So, do you think that the best solution is for every country to develop its own response plan based on, the how long it's going to take them to build a stable economy, et cetera, when these responses are critical, and you can't necessarily wait for a country to have a stable economy before it has a reliable wildfire response. So, I'm wondering if this is something that could be outsourced by countries that don't have the infrastructure to maintain a substantial wildfire response. Could could they hire for all of that? Basically, like you said, we've got a fire. Can you come? Could an organization develop the ability to respond, on a on call basis?
It's hard to do that effectively if it takes 48, 72 hours to get the assets there, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
sure.
so, but I think that's the only alternative. I mean, I think what it's happening today, just what you described. There are countries out there that when the fire problem, Colombia is a good example. What did Colombia do when they started getting fires this year that they'd never gotten before? Well, yeah, they started calling around and getting assets down there, and I think they pulled assets from Mexico. They worked through USAID to get assets down there, and they just they got them from where they could, and eventually those fires stopped. Was it an effective response? I don't know that, but probably not as effective as it could be. But
Not timely
don't
anyway.
I don't see an alternative to you know that dynamic. I think it's going to be with us forever. 20 years ago, no one called no one called 10 Tanker and said, can you come? But now we get it all the time. And I think that all of our colleagues, you know, in the Type 1 helicopter world and in, you know, the large air tanker world feel the same thing.
And it's not just about getting aircraft; it's about getting experienced personnel
Exactly so.
across the fire, right? So
Yeah, right, right.
yeah,
Hard thing to do.
yeah. But I think it's probably going to be easier. You know, you'd be in a better position to put together a response team to send to Chile, Argentina, Colombia, Brazil than they would be to home grow their own intellectual resources there, as well as equipment capabilities.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's, I, I can't say that, you know, I mean, I think let's take Chile, for instance, you know, very capable people, very smart people. They got great firefighters down there. You know, their bomberos are very, very proud, very capable people. And, you know, I would never assume to go into a country and say, well, we can develop it better than you can. You know, we'll come and show you what to do. I think that, you know, the people who own the land and who have some, you know, that tie to it, I think that they're the ones who need to do it. And, you know, we can help. But I think that it takes a while, but they can get there. So,
Yeah. It's just what I was thinking about was the transfer of knowledge from the experience fighting wildland fires,
yeah, right.
because because they may have the will, they may have the intellect, they may have the intelligence, etc. But you've been fighting wildland fires for a long time, and most of the world hasn't, and
Right.
that's new for most countries.
No, I think that that's true. I mean, we see that when we went to Mexico a few times, and the first time we went down there, we we sent an advance party before us, and we met with the ICs, and we met with the people who were doing the, you know, the aerial work, and we put our own guy up on the air who ended up not only sort of controlling the air show to get us in and out very safely, but um, you know, was an old experienced firefighter at the same time, and they loved it. They loved the fact that we had someone up there with that many years of experience that knew what they were doing and could help them. I think sort of along with it, it turned it into a much different program than they had before. So I think that happens every year, and you know, you're right. Experience that's gathered here through the years, here in North America through the years, is yeah, sort of sought after and yeah, valued when it gets out somewhere else.
When you drop in South America, does the drop spin the other way?
I, I think it does, Steve. Yeah,
Okay. Well, that's a high note for us to end on. And Judd, I cannot thank you enough for spending some of your morning here with me. I really appreciate your time.
happy to do it. Yeah.
Great. And anything comes up, you get on some interesting cases, something new that you want to share, please reach out.
Okay,
Yeah,
we'll do
hope
it.
to have you back here. Great. Thank you again. That's John Gould is the CEO of 10 Tanker. You've seen their work and awfully impressive stuff out there. I want to thank you for joining me for another hour of The Fire Break. We're sponsored by Team Wildfire, and we'll see you back on the next one. Take care.